next one is EPPR, which is Emergency Prevention, Preparedness and Response Work Group. So here, this is an international cooperation on the environmental protection and sustainable development in the Arctic. The Emergency Prevention, Preparedness and Response Working Group was established. So that the main objective of this is to have an environmental protection in the Arctic area. This incorporates United Nations Conventions of Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, which is written in 1982, and the Cooperation of Aeronautical and Maritime Search and Rescue, SAR, which was incorporated in 2013, and Chicago Convention, Ottawa, and the Marine Oil Preparedness and Response in the Arctic MOPSA declarations. So that means many of the marine areas are covered based on this particular thing, where this is nothing but emergency prevention and preparedness and response. So that means if you are going to respond to any emergency, especially the environmental emergencies, any oil spills or related things, so that means you have to travel within the marine boundaries of different countries. So that's the reason here every neighboring countries collaborate with each other during this particular emergency prevention and preparedness responses. So the objective of the search and rescue agreement is to strengthen aeronautical and maritime search and rescue operations and coordination in the Arctic. So this is one of the very important thing, because oil spills generally used to happen when big oil tankers hit big ice chunks, and when they broke down, so there will be a lot of spillage of oil. So to save the Arctic, this particular group is actively working on with collaboration with many countries. So the objective of the MOPSA agreement is to strengthen cooperation, coordination and mutual assistance among the parties on oil pollution. So this is a major concern for many of the countries, and the preparedness and response in the Arctic in order to protect the marine environment from pollution by oil. So this is the very crucial thing for which people are very much focused, countries are focused on this particular aspect. And if you look at the EPPR boundaries, so Canada has boundaries with Denmark and USA. So that you can see here. So the blue line, here is the Denmark, this is Canada area, so United States is here. So that means the Canada has border or boundaries with United States and Denmark. So all these areas can be used for the rescue operations, environment protection, preparedness. So that is for the Canada. And similarly, when we look at Denmark and Iceland, Denmark and Norway. So Denmark is here, so Iceland is here, and Norway is here. So these two countries are in close proximity to Denmark, that means Greenland. So the area covered under this is all these areas which are given here. Similarly, Finland has a connection with Norway, Finland with Sweden, Finland with Russia also. So if you look at Finland, Finland is here. So the nearby countries are Sweden, Norway and the Russian Federation. So that means there is a large area which Finland can cooperate and help these countries if there is any environmental emergency. Similarly, Iceland has closest neighbor, that is Norway. So Iceland is here, so the closest neighbor is Norway. So these two have collaboration, and similarly Norway with Sweden and Norway with Russia, and finally Russia with United States. That means the Alaska side of United States and the entire Russian area, Russian Federation, collaborate with each other whenever there is an emergency in this particular region. So we move on to the next one, which is the conservation of Arctic flora and fauna. Here, to conserve the natural environment and allow economic development, this particular working group was constituted, and the establishment is to create protected areas. So if you look at this map, especially there are vast area is covered, much higher area than the simple Arctic Circle, because there are various Arctic flora and fauna which exist in all this region, and the main purpose of this Arctic flora and fauna conservation is to preserve and prevent extinction of the species. So here, what are all the activities they do? they monitor the Arctic biodiversity, and the another main job of them is to conservation of Arctic species and their habitat. So that means lots of areas in this region are prohibited areas. People are not easily permitted to go because hunting is one of the sport many people follow. So when people start hunting polar bears and walrus and other sea animals, their population decline. So to prevent and to conserve those habitat, people are not permitted to go and hunt in these areas. So this is being monitored by the conservation of Arctic and flora and fauna. So again, establishment of protected areas, conservation of nature outside the protected areas, the integration of conservation objectives and measures for economic sectors of the society. Because if people start hunting and fishing is a major concern in this area, so the local people, especially the indigenous people, will suffer if lots of fishes are being caught by the outsiders. So to prevent those kind of things, the conservation of Arctic flora and fauna actively works. The next one is the tree line boundaries. So this tree line boundaries is basically the northern limit beyond which trees do not grow. So that is what called as the tree line. In other words, the Arctic definition for the tree line is basically this particular thing where northern limit beyond which the trees do not grow. And when we look at this northern tree line, this is not a straight line per se, or it is a narrow area, but this is basically a huge area, and there are various regions which extend in kilometers in this particular area. So this is a forest line, and tens of kilometers wide between the northern coniferous, that is the boreal forest, and the tundra or the taiga. So that is where the tree lines are mainly the defining point between what is in the Arctic Circle and what is outside of the Arctic Circle. And of course, the next major one is the marine boundary. So the purpose of marine boundary is to decide who is allowed to do what in which area. So this is the greater concern for many countries. When we look at the economic reasons, because Arctic region has plenty of resources. So most of the things are within the sea. So one country can actually get into another country in the confrontation mode while they want to extract these kind of resources. So that is the reason the marine boundaries are actually made very specifically to define who is allowed to do what in which area. And the reason why we have to talk about marine boundary is, if you are looking at a country, then trespassing or going to another country is going to be controlled by the border security force most of the time. So that means people cannot cross in the land from one country to another country very easily. Whereas when we talk about the marine, there is seldom people who are actually securing the borders. So in other words, there will be patrolling by the sea guards, but not all the time they will be present. So that means anybody who knows when there is no sea guards, they can simply get into another country and they catch fish or they do other activities. So this is one of the reasons they wanted to have a permanent boundary so that other people should not enter into one country's boundaries. So unlike the land, as I mentioned, the sea is more open or used for transportation, or rather we can say trespassing by other nations. So each country has a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone they call EEZ. So this is the most crucial part for the marine boundary. So even though a country's border ends, the land border ends, within the sea they have 200 nautical miles exclusively for that particular country in the economic zone. This is based on the border on land and the continental shelf. So land border is easily seen, but the continental shelf is a very, very tricky area, and many people fight because nobody knows what is exactly the continental shelf, because this requires geological proof from various countries. For example, country A can tell my continental shelf goes within the sea for hundreds and thousands of kilometers. But how do we prove it? So this is the biggest area where many countries are actually fighting. So that is the reason the marine boundaries are actually made, so that these kind of fights are reduced. And as the disputes on the boundaries arise due to economic activities. Why this dispute all comes? Because the sea is having lots of fishes and hydrocarbon exploration, shipping. So these are all the economic activity which is very essential for the local communities. So no country wants to give it to other countries. So that is the reason the marine boundaries are defined. And if you look at the Eastern Canadian archipelago, 63° north, that is north between Baffin Island and the west coast of Greenland and in the east coast, these areas are within the Arctic boundaries. Similarly, north of 80° west of Spitsbergen and north of 76° in the Barents Sea is also considered as the marine boundary. And in the Pacific region, the Bering Strait, that is 72° north, and the Wrangel Island in the west to the Amundsen Gulf in the east. So these are various boundaries which are available for different countries. And again, the boundary is arbitrarily drawn across the Bering Strait. So this is another biggest problem for many neighboring countries. Davis Straits, the Labrador Sea and the Hudson Bay for the Greenland, Iceland, Norwegian, and Barnetskara and White Seas and the Bering Sea. So there are various seas which are present in this particular Arctic region, and every country wants to have the boundary within those sea. If you very clearly look here, we will see that Canada and Denmark. So these are all the various countries. So Canada has a boundary with USA. Canada has a boundary with Denmark also. So that means these two countries, the marine boundaries are drawn for these two countries together. Similarly, Russia has United States and Norway, that is Svalbard. These two are the areas where Russia has the marine boundaries. Similarly, Denmark has with Norway, Jan Mayen Island and the Iceland are the two areas where Denmark has a marine boundary. And similarly, Canada has marine boundary with USA and Denmark or Greenland. Norway has a marine boundary with Denmark as well as Russia. So these are all the various countries which are adjacent to each other have their marine boundaries.